I have about 15 minutes to persuade you on the merits of the Missing Salmon Alliance, and to check whether I'm on course, I'm planning to ask you a question about halfway through. Nothing complicated, but it will require you to indicate a yes or no answer with a show of hands. My talk is predicated on the question, why support the Missing Salmon Alliance? When things get tough, the standard British response is generally keep calm and carry on. Ordinarily, this is not a bad philosophy, but viewed through the eyes of a salmon, you might be forgiven for thinking that it was just a convenient way of doing nothing. By way of an example, let us take a quick virtual tour around the Atlantic. Let's start with Norway. Last year, the Norwegians calmly told us that the greatest threat to their wild Atlantic salmon population was genetic introgression. Quelle surprise! With 1.2 million tons of farmed salmon in open cages along their coast and reported escapes of 180,000 farm fish a year, was anyone really that surprised? Moving west across to Iceland. After the worst catch statistics on record, the Icelandic government has this year calmly sold licenses for open cage salmon farming into their pristine waters. Is someone having a laugh? Well, they've just not joined up the dots. Heading further west, the Greenlanders are calmly reported as exceeding their commercial salmon netting quotas by a factor of 2, as the wild salmon populations off the east coast of America and Canada calmly fight for survival. Moving closer to home, wild salmon are virtually extinct across the southern European range, and they're disappearing fast off the south coast of England. In Wales, salmon numbers are calmly reported to be at their lowest levels since records began. Head north to Scotland, and the entire autumn cohort on the mighty River Tweed has disappeared. And we're told by the Tweed commissioners, keep calm, it's just a timing issue. Seriously? For 25 years, we've presided, and by we I mean you and me, and any fisherman, any river owner, any river manager, or anybody with any responsibility for the welfare of Scottish salmon, have presided over the total decimation of the entire West Coast salmon population. Whilst on the east coast of Scotland, rivers once famous for their salmon runs, the Tay, the Spey and the Dee, are shadows of their former selves. And yet fishermen still kill some of the fish that they catch. Viewed through the eyes of one of our remaining salmon, you might think that that's a little bit odd. In the far north of Scotland, probably the last remaining stronghold for wild Atlantic salmon in the United Kingdom, we now know that approximately half the entire smolt run dies before it gets to sea. But getting a license to control any predators requires a degree in keeping calm. The impact of these losses goes far further than the loss of good fishing. Wild Atlantic salmon are embedded into the cultural, social, and economic fibre of our rural communities, making this species an integral part of our human lives. Scientists tell us that our wild salmon are a keystone species. If we lose them, We lose vast chunks of the ecosystems that they support. Still, the decline continues. Surely to lose wild Atlantic salmon in the United Kingdom is unthinkable. Yet on the current trajectory, they will all but disappear in the next 20 years. Keep calm and carry on until there's nothing left. Really? Is that the best that we can do? I don't think so. Here comes the question I mentioned, and I'm going to ask for a simple show of hands. As I see it, we have two choices as a way forward with wild salmon. Firstly, we keep calm and carry on doing nothing. Or secondly, we ask, what is it that we need to do? And we try a little bit harder. You have to support one of these choices by raising your hand. So here they are again. Hands up for option one. Carry on until there's nothing left. We had a joker yesterday in the rehearsal who put their hand up. I'm not going to sneak on you, Colin. Hands up for option two. Ask, what do we need to do? And try a little bit harder. I'm quite relieved about that. The rest of my talk would be rather pointless if we'd gone for option one. I don't know how we define a crisis in a population, but let me give you just two statistics for wild salmon. Firstly, survival from juvenile to adult stage has declined from upwards of 25% to below 5% in just 25 years. And secondly, absolute numbers of salmon have fallen from around 10 million to just over 2.5 million in the same period of time. 3/4 of the population gone in 25 years. By any measure, that has to constitute a crisis. And the key question in any crisis is, how do we manage it? And what we've already agreed, with a show of hands, is that we haven't done a particularly good job so far. There are many people here and elsewhere who have done what they can with the limited resources available to them. But measured against this relentless decline, it comes up woefully short. It's not coordinated, it's not effective, and put bluntly, it's not nearly enough. A change is needed, and it's needed now if we want to reverse this trend. The question that we should be asking is, what do we need to do to reverse this trend? And this is where I believe the Missing Salmon Alliance steps up to the plate. There are three things that the Missing Salmon Alliance does to address this question. Firstly, it provides a clear aim. Salmon numbers are declining year on year. The Missing Salmon Alliance has just one aim, which all parties agree: reverse this trend. Secondly, it provides a clear strategy. We all know that we have a problem. We've known it for years. But what we haven't had before is a clear and collective strategy to resolve it. The Missing Salmon Alliance has that strategy. It's called the Likely Suspects Framework. The Likely Suspects Framework breaks down the life cycle of a salmon by geographic areas. It looks into these areas in forensic detail to establish what percentage of our fish are dying in that space and what the cause of that mortality is. Most importantly, it then determines what can be done to mitigate against that mortality. The Likely Suspects Framework works across individual rivers, regional areas. It works nationally and internationally. It has been adopted by NASCO as a central project for the International Year of the Salmon, and it provides that clear plan that we can all use. We're going to hear more about the Likely Suspects framework in a minute from Colin Bull. The third thing that the Missing Salmon Alliance has is the strength of the whole team. The scale of this problem has brought home a clear realization to those in salmon conservation. Reversing this trend cannot be done alone. Only acting together, working to one collective aim, with one clear strategy, the Likely Suspects framework, are we going to make any progress. We have, for the first time, the strength of the team rather than the struggle of the individual. The strength to pool ideas, resources, skills, science, technology, and in particular, fundraising. The Atlantic Salmon Trust, Salmon and Trout Conservation, the Angling Trust, and the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust have initiated the Missing Salmon Alliance to bring about change. And they welcome anyone or any organisation who wants to contribute to that change. Pulling the Missing Salmon Alliance together has taken a superhuman effort. And it occurred to me that we've never properly introduced the team, so I thought I might do that using a well-known superheroes theme. I have to tell you, I got rather a mixed response at the rehearsal yesterday. First up is our leader, David Mayhew. We all know that David is a god, so Thor seemed, well, rather appropriate. In the team, and well known to many of you, is Teresa, Chief Executive of the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust. From Salmon and Trout Conservation, we have their Chief Executive, Paul Knight. Next up, we have Mark Bilsby, who's the Chief Executive of the Atlantic Salmon Trust. We have a slightly curious arrangement from the Angling Trust because Jamie Cook doesn't take over as their Chief Executive till January, and his place is currently being occupied by Stuart. And finally, we have Dr. Colin Bull, the Principal Investigator of the Likely Suspects framework. Thank you very much to all our superheroes. Perhaps a quick round of applause. So enough of the fun. I want to finish by recapping on the question that I asked at the beginning. Why should we support the Missing Salmon Alliance? For me, there are three compelling reasons. Firstly, the Missing Salmon Alliance has a clear aim: reverse this trend. Secondly, we're going a bit fast. Secondly, the Missing Salmon Alliance has a clear strategy: deliver the Likely Suspects framework. And finally, the Missing Salmon Alliance has the power of the team. That is why I fully support the Missing Salmon Alliance. That is why the Atlantic Salmon Trust fully supports the Missing Salmon Alliance. And I hope that is the reasons why you will also support the Missing Salmon Alliance. I'm going to hand over to Colin Bull. I've started your presentation, Colin, but you'll have to finish it in just a minute. But let me finish with this. We're going to need all our superhero strength to deliver the Likely Suspects framework and reverse this decline. We are also going to need lots and lots of money to make this happen. So whether you're an influencer working with one of the supporting organizations, a keen fisherman, a conservationist, a millionaire, or better still, a billionaire philanthropist, or if you put your hand in the air to indicate that a change is needed in approach to salmon conservation to protect this amazing fish, then I hope that you will support David and the Missing Salmon Alliance, and you will find in your pack a pledge card. Pedro, who's going to sum up at the end of today's proceedings, is going to talk a little bit more about the pledge card. No fill-in, no lunch. That's the warning. Thank you very much indeed.